His first target was a group of alien soldiers who had taken cover behind a crumbling building. They had set up heavy weapons and were preparing to launch an attack on the human troops in the distance. They didn't even know Riker was there. He activated his cloaking device, turning invisible, and silently approached them from behind. When he was within range, he made his move. The first shot rang out, and an alien soldier dropped to the ground, dead before he even knew what hit him. The rest of the group spun around in confusion, searching for the source of the shot. But by then, Riker was already moving again, picking off each soldier with deadly precision. In just seconds, the entire group was wiped out, their bodies lying motionless on the ground. From the command center, General Lether watched the chaos unfold. He was furious. His forces, the best-trained soldiers in the galaxy, were being slaughtered by a single human. It was a humiliation he had never imagined possible. He turned to his officers, his voice sharp with anger. "Send in reinforcements. We need to neutralize him. Now." But the reinforcements didn't arrive in time. Riker was already on the move again. He sprinted across the battlefield, using the cover of the wreckage and the smoke to stay hidden. His movements were quick, his senses sharp. The alien soldiers were disoriented, unsure of where he would strike next. Riker didn't care about playing fair. War wasn't about fairness. It was about winning. And right now, he was winning. He was the storm that had come to destroy everything in its path. As he moved, he activated a series of explosive devices that sent shockwaves through the battlefield, sending alien soldiers flying in all directions. The explosions were timed perfectly, creating chaos and confusion among the alien ranks. The alien forces were scrambling to adjust, but it was clear they were out of their depth. Riker wasn't just a mercenary. He was a force of nature. His experience in combat, combined with the advanced technology at his disposal, made him an unstoppable force on the battlefield. The aliens were learning this lesson the hard way. Back on the front lines, Zarek, the young alien soldier, watched in disbelief as the human continued to wreak havoc on his comrades. Zarek had been part of the initial assault, and he had seen many battles. He had fought alongside some of the most elite soldiers in the galaxy, but nothing had prepared him for this. The human was everywhere, striking from all angles, and there was nothing his squad could do to stop him. "Sir, we've got a problem," Zarek reported to his officer, his voice shaking with fear. "The human mercenary is wiping out our forces. We need help now." His officer, a seasoned veteran named Commander Varen, looked out across the battlefield, his face grim. "I see it," Varen said, "but our reinforcements are still far away. We can't hold this position much longer. We need to regroup and fight smarter." Zarek's heart pounded in his chest. He had always been confident in his skills, but facing off against Riker was different. It was as if the human knew exactly how to exploit every weakness in their strategy. Every move they made, the human was there, turning it against them. Riker's next move was just as devastating. He had identified a group of alien commanders who were trying to coordinate the retreat of their remaining forces. These commanders were protected by elite bodyguards, but Riker had no intention of letting them escape. He knew that if the commanders got away, the aliens would regroup and continue the fight. The battle would never end, and his job would never be finished. He used his cloaking device again, moving silently through the battlefield until he was right behind the commanders. The bodyguards didn't even have a chance to react. Riker's sniper rifle fired once, twice, and in the span of just a few seconds, all the bodyguards were dead, their bodies crumpling to the ground in a heap. The commanders, shocked and confused, tried to draw their weapons, but it was already too late. Riker was faster. He dropped down from the shadows, landing silently on the ground, and with a few quick, precise strikes, he incapacitated the remaining commanders. His work was methodical, ruthless, and efficient. "General Lether will be furious," one of the commanders muttered, his voice filled with panic. "General Lether won't be able to do anything if he's dead," Riker replied coldly, his voice muffled by his helmet. He wasn't here to play games. He was here to win, and he wouldn't stop until he had achieved that goal. Back at the command center, Lether's fury reached its peak. "I want that human dead," he shouted, his voice echoing through the room. "Send everything we've got at him. Throw every ship, every soldier, every weapon at him. He won't escape this." The first target was the alien shock troops. These were the most dangerous of the alien soldiers, each one carrying enough firepower to level a building. Riker couldn't afford to let them reach the human forces. He dropped from the sky like a comet, landing in the middle of the shock troops with a thunderous crash. The shock troops barely had time to react before Riker was upon them, moving with a speed and grace that was almost impossible to follow. His advanced targeting system picked off alien soldiers with pinpoint accuracy. Each shot a deadly confirmation that Riker was in control of the battlefield. His rifle was an extension of his will, and it tore through the aliens' defenses as if they were paper. But the aliens weren't done yet. As Riker mowed down their elite troops, the remaining forces launched their counteroffensive. The drones filled the sky, their mechanical whirring deafening as they closed in on Riker's position. He was surrounded, but that didn't faze him. If anything, it only made the fight more exciting. Riker engaged his suit's cloaking device, becoming invisible to the drone's sensors. The drones frantically searched the area, their sensors scanning every inch of the terrain, but Riker had already moved. In a blur, he reappeared behind them, activating a set of EMP grenades that fried the drone's circuits in an instant. The sky was filled with sparks and the sound of mechanical failure as the drones fell from the sky, crashing into the ground in pieces. But even as Riker eliminated the drones, the alien warships continued to close in. These massive ships, bristling with weapons, were designed to obliterate entire cities. Their guns locked onto Riker's position, and for a moment, it seemed as though nothing could stop them. Yet Riker wasn't done. He wasn't just a mercenary. He was a strategist. He knew how to use the terrain to his advantage. The moment the warships fired, Riker activated his suit's defense systems, deploying a massive energy shield that absorbed the incoming blasts. The impact sent a shockwave through the battlefield, but Riker was unharmed. The warships were momentarily stunned by the shield's power, and that was all the time Riker needed. Riker's eyes narrowed as he activated the suit's thrusters once more, propelling himself toward the closest warship. The alien forces, still reeling from his earlier attacks, were too slow to respond. Riker's trajectory was perfect. He hit the ship's hull with the force of a meteor, and with a single strike, his suit's weapons tore through the ship's outer defenses. The warship's interior was a labyrinth of metallic corridors and armored rooms. Riker fought his way through the ship, cutting down any alien soldier that stood in his way. The aliens had hoped their technological superiority would intimidate him, but they were wrong. Riker was a soldier, and he had one advantage that the aliens couldn't match: determination. As he made his way deeper into the heart of the warship, Riker's HUD flashed with critical information. The warship's core was ahead, and with it, the ship's most vital systems. Destroying it would cripple the entire ship, making it useless. But the deeper Riker went, the stronger the alien resistance became. They were throwing everything they had at him, but Riker's suit absorbed their firepower with ease. He was a one-man army, and nothing would stop him. Finally, Riker reached the ship's core, a massive chamber filled with alien energy sources and reactor systems. He planted a series of explosives around the room, knowing it wouldn't be long before reinforcements arrived. As he activated the detonators, he sprinted back toward the exit, narrowly avoiding an alien soldier who tried to block his path. The explosion rocked the entire ship as it began to tear itself apart. The warship was done, and so were the hopes of the alien forces who had counted on it. Back on the battlefield, the remaining alien soldiers were scrambling, trying to reorganize, but it was too late. Riker had already shifted the tide of the battle once again. The alien forces, their shock troops eliminated, their drones destroyed, and their warships in flames, were on the verge of complete collapse. Zarek, the young alien soldier, had watched it all unfold with growing fear. He had been trained for combat, but no amount of training had prepared him for the sheer brutality of Riker's attack. He had lost count of how many of his comrades had fallen in the wake of the humans' onslaught. Zarek had been part of the assault against the humans, but now it felt like everything was slipping away. The once proud alien forces, with their advanced technology and overwhelming numbers, were being dismantled by one man. As the alien soldiers began to regroup and press forward, Riker used his surroundings to his advantage. He sprinted up a nearby wall, using the height to get a better vantage point. From here, he could see the entire battlefield. The alien forces were spread out in a loose formation, trying to encircle this position. They were good, but they weren't good enough. Riker had already anticipated their moves and was several steps ahead. He jumped from his perch, landing behind a group of alien soldiers. In a blur of motion, he fired off a burst of energy, taking them out before they even realized what was happening. As their bodies crumpled to the ground, Riker moved on, continuing his relentless assault. The alien forces were beginning to panic. They had expected a quick victory, but instead, they found themselves caught in a battle they were losing. Their commanders tried to rally their troops, but Riker's unpredictable tactics were throwing their plans into disarray. The more the aliens tried to adjust, the more Riker outmaneuvered them. Every time they thought they had him cornered, he was already gone, striking from a new angle. The warship above continued its descent, and Riker knew time was running out. If he didn't act soon, the aliens would be able to deploy their full force, and the battle would be lost. He needed to take out the warship's defenses, and fast. Riker sprinted toward the heart of the battlefield, where the alien commanders were overseeing the fight. These were the true leaders of the alien invasion, the ones who had coordinated the assault on Earth. They were heavily protected by a squad of elite soldiers, and getting to them would be no easy task. But Riker wasn't the type to back down from a fight. He was already moving, his mind racing as he calculated his next move. He activated his suit's cloaking device, disappearing from sight. The alien commanders were too focused on the battle to notice him approaching. Riker crept closer, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the tension building, but he kept his cool. This was his moment. He reached the first commander and quickly took him out with a silent strike. The alien's body crumpled to the ground without a sound. Riker didn't waste any time. He moved on to the next commander, eliminating him with the same efficiency. The alien soldiers were beginning to notice something was wrong, but it was too late. Riker had already dismantled their leadership, and the rest of the alien forces were in disarray. With the alien commanders neutralized, Riker knew the warship was vulnerable. He quickly made his way toward the ship's exposed underside, where a small hangar bay opened up to reveal a collection of heavy artillery and troops. Riker's exosuit's targeting system locked onto the nearest artillery gun, and with a few quick shots, he disabled it. The aliens had no idea what had hit them. As he took out the remaining guns and soldiers, Riker's path to the warship's core became clearer. The final push was coming, but Riker wasn't finished yet. The aliens would fight to the bitter end, but Riker had already won the war for them. All that was left was to finish what he had started and bring the alien forces to their knees. The battle had reached its peak. The air was thick with smoke, the ground shaken by explosions, and the sky above, once clear, now blotted out by the towering silhouette of the alien warship. Riker stood in the midst of the chaos, breathing heavily, sweat dripping down his face, his heart pounding in his chest. The tides of war were shifting. Just hours ago, the alien forces had been on the offensive, their numbers overwhelming, and their technology far superior. But now, the humans, led by Riker's relentless assault, had begun to turn the battle in their favor. The alien warship, once an impenetrable fortress, had been severely crippled. Its outer defenses were in shambles, and its once mighty turrets lay disabled, their weapons no longer able to fire. The elite soldiers, who had once seemed invincible, were scattered and disorganized, their leadership decimated by Riker's precision strikes. He had done what seemed impossible. He had shaken the aliens to their core. But the battle wasn't over yet. The alien forces were regrouping, and despite the chaos, their commanders weren't completely defeated. The warship was still hovering, still capable of unleashing destruction, and its crew was determined to make one final push to reclaim control. If they could just regain their strength and push Riker and the human forces back, they could still turn the tide of the battle. Riker knew this. He understood that the last push was always the hardest, the most dangerous. It was the moment when everything could be lost, or everything could be won. He couldn't afford to hesitate now. The fate of the entire battlefield rested on his shoulders. He detonated a series of explosives at the base of the warship, the blast sending shockwaves through the battlefield. The ship's hull cracked open, revealing the core. The ship shuddered as its systems began to fail, the power slowly fading. The human forces surged forward, the aliens scrambling to defend the warship, but it was too late. Riker's attack had dealt the death blow, and the warship was no longer a threat. The aliens were broken, their once proud fleet reduced to nothing more than a pile of wreckage. The humans had won. But even as the victory seemed certain, Riker knew this wasn't the end. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. This was only one fight in a much larger conflict, and Riker was ready for whatever came next. As the alien warship exploded in a fiery inferno above him, Riker looked out over the battlefield. The shifting tide had brought victory, but the war was not yet finished. The battle for Earth had just begun. The battlefield lay in ruins, and Riker stood in the center of it all. His armor battered, his face smeared with dirt and blood. The once chaotic environment, filled with the constant sound of blaster fire and explosions, had grown eerily quiet. The alien warship that had once been a symbol of invincibility now lay in pieces, burning in the sky. The air smelled of victory and the heavy scent of smoke. Riker looked around, seeing his team of mercenaries, all exhausted but standing tall, ready for whatever came next. The human forces, once outnumbered and on the brink of defeat, had turned the tide of the war. The battle that had seemed so hopeless hours ago was now over. The humans had won. But as Riker stood there, taking in the sight of the fallen alien forces, he knew this victory was just the beginning. There was still much to be done. The aliens had underestimated humanity's resilience, and now, after a long and grueling fight, the humans were ready to reclaim their place in the galaxy. The human reign had begun. The victory had been hard-fought. The aliens had not gone down easily. Their technology had been advanced, their strategies cunning, and their forces strong. But humanity's spirit, their drive, and their will to survive had carried them through. Riker knew that they had proven something not just to the aliens, but to themselves. They were not weak, not helpless, not the underdogs. The humans were a force to be reckoned with. As Riker turned to face his comrades, he could see the exhaustion in their eyes, the relief that they had made it through. But there was something else there as well, a sense of pride, a feeling that they had done something incredible. It wasn't just a victory in battle, it was a statement. It was a sign that humanity could stand toe-to-toe with the most powerful alien forces in the galaxy and come out victorious. "We did it," Riker said quietly, his voice hoarse from the strain of battle. His words were simple, but they carried weight. His team had followed him into the heart of the enemy forces, had fought through the chaos, and had come out on top. One of the mercenaries, a grizzled veteran named Donovan, slapped him on the back. "Damn right we did," he said, grinning. "Who knew humans had it in them?" Riker smiled back, but the joy of victory was tempered by the harsh reality of the situation. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The aliens would not simply accept defeat. This was just one battle in a much larger war. Riker knew that the alien forces would regroup, would bring more ships, more troops, and more advanced technology. The fight for Earth was far from finished. "Enjoy the moment," Riker told his team. "But keep your heads on straight. The war's not over." The mercenaries nodded, their faces showing a mix of relief and determination. They knew the stakes were high. But for the first time in a long time, they had a reason to believe that they could win, that they could take back what was theirs. The human forces, having pushed the aliens back, began to regroup and rebuild. Their victory was not just about surviving. It was about reclaiming their future. Earth had been under constant threat from alien forces for far too long. The battle they had just won was their first true victory, and it marked the beginning of a new chapter for humanity. Riker and his team had led the charge, but now it was time for the rest of humanity to step up. The mercenaries were no longer just soldiers for hire. They had become the leaders, the symbol of hope for Earth's future. Riker's actions had shown the world what humans were capable of when they worked together, when they refused to give up. And now, it was time for the rest of Earth's forces to join in the fight.